Hits like Heroes and Let's Dance brought in millions for David Bowie, but he abruptly stopped playing them. He abruptly ended his 2004 tour and disappeared from the public eye. He was urged to embark on a greatest hits tour by the manager. Bowie told friends, "No, I'd rather die than become a nostalgia act, even though the money would have been outrageous." A friend from his youth described it as stubborn. His supporters referred to it as self-centered. However, the true cause was more sinister than anyone realized. On January 8, 1947, David Bowie was born David Robert Jones in Brixton, London. Margaret Mary Peggy Burns, his mother, was a movie usher. John Jones worked as a promotions officer for a children's charity, as did his father, Haywood Stenton. Their residence at 40 Stansfield Road was located on the boundary between Brixton and Stockwell, a bustling neighborhood of London that was home to many working-class families. Bowie was surrounded by films, music, and the vibrancy of a city that was changing as he grew up. He made an impression from a young age. His teachers described his dancing as astonishing and vividly artistic when he was just 9 years old. He stood out from the other children because of his organic rhythm. His father brought records by American musicians like Little Richard and Elvis Presley home after noticing his passion for music. Bowie later claimed to have heard God the first time he heard Tutti Frutti. Everything changed because of that song. He picked up a saxophone by the time he turned 13 in 1961 and began studying under renowned baritone saxophonist Ronnie Ross. He was greatly influenced by Terry Burns, his half-brother. Terry introduced him to jazz greats like Eric Dolphy and John Coltrane as well as beat literature. Bowie learnt about a world of music and ideas through him that went beyond what was then in vogue. However, Terry battled mental illness and eventually ended up in an institution. His untimely death by suicide in 1985 had a profound effect on Bowie, influencing songs like Jump They Say that explored loss, struggle, and fear. Something that would permanently alter Bowie's appearance occurred in February 1962, when he was 15 years old. He and his friend George Underwood argued about a girl. Underwood seriously injured him by punching him in the left eye during the argument. Despite emergency surgery by doctors at Moorfields Eye Hospital, the injury left his pupil permanently dilated. He developed the iconic look that would later contribute to his enigmatic persona when his eye turned a deep, fixed black. Bowie and Underwood stayed friends in spite of everything that transpired. In later years, they even collaborated on art and music. The path to stardom was arduous and fraught with obstacles. Bowie released 10 singles between 1964 and 1969 under various bands and names, such as Davy Jones and the Lower Third, the Manish Boys, and Davy Jones and the King Bees. None of them were successful. Liza Jane, his debut single, was released in 1964. However, despite TV advertising, it did not attract any attention. To avoid being confused with Davy Jones of the Monkees, he changed his name in 1966. Inspired by American frontiersman Jim Bowie and his renowned knife, he selected David Bowie. Success was still a long way off, but it was his first significant reinvention. His music continued to struggle for listeners. The Laughing Gnome, the 1967 single, was a failure. Additionally, his self-titled debut album from that same year failed to leave a lasting impression. Professionals in the industry were also unimpressed. When I tried out for the BBC in 1965 with the Lower Third, I received negative feedback. Singing incorrect notes, the vocalist sounds amateurish. The group has nothing to offer. He worked wherever he could to make ends meet, even cleaning kitchens while pursuing his dream. Bowie experimented with various forms of self-expression during this period. Lindsay Kemp, his mime instructor, taught him how to incorporate movement into a performance. He also dabbled in avant-garde theater, taking cues from commedia dell'arte and kabuki. His actions were not always understood by the audience. When he opened for Tyrannosaurus Rex at one show, the audience was unsure of how to react to his performance. They anticipated rock, not theatrical mime, and the majority of their response was perplexity. Although David Bowie's path to fame took many detours, Space Oddity marked his first significant breakthrough in 1969. 5 days prior to Apollo 11's lunar launch, on July 11, the song was made public. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon for the first time 9 days later. The moment was ideal. Space Oddity served as an unofficial soundtrack to one of humanity's greatest triumphs when the BBC used it in their coverage of Apollo 11. The song about the moon landing was not written by Bowie, despite the connection. His true source of inspiration was Stanley Kubrick's sci-fi masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Bowie later acknowledged that the movie, which he had seen while high, had a profound effect on him. Major Tom, an astronaut who departs Earth and loses communication with ground control, is the subject of the song. Built around a mellotron, its eerie sound distinguished it from everything else at the time. Gus Duggan took over and saw its potential after producer Tony Visconti first wrote it off as a cheesy attempt to capitalize on the space craze. When it was released, it became Bowie's first true hit, peaking at number 5 in the UK. Space Oddity evolved into much more than just a popular song over time. It became the first music video shot in space when Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield performed it on board the ISS in 2013. Bowie never spent much time in one location. He created Ziggy Stardust in 1972, a character that forever altered rock music. Ziggy was an androgynous alien rock star who had been sent to warn Earth of its impending destruction. Bowie's June 16, 1972, album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, was centered around the character. Ziggy's music and appearance were equally daring. He was hard to miss with his glittering jumpsuits, theatrical makeup, and bright red hair. He drew inspiration from a variety of sources. Vince Taylor is an English rock musician. The album told the whole story of the legendary Stardust Cowboy, a Texan musician and performer in Japanese kabuki theater. Rock and roll songs like Starman, Moonage Daydream and Rock and Roll Suicide helped fans follow Ziggy's ascent and decline from rock stardom to eventual ruin. Following Bowie's appearance on Top of the Pops, where he casually put his arm around guitarist Mick Ronson, Starman became an enormous hit. Although it was a subtle move, it was revolutionary in 1972. It was unlike anything audiences had ever witnessed. The distinctions between performer and character, male and female, and human and extraterrestrial were all muddled by Ziggy. It was such a strong persona. Bowie found it difficult to distance himself from it. After almost 2 years of playing Ziggy, he later acknowledged that it was hard to distinguish where the character ended and he started. An exhausting tour schedule and the pressure to maintain the image began to wear them down. At London's Hammersmith Odeon on July 3, 1973, Bowie shocked fans by declaring Ziggy's retirement. "Not only is this the last show of this tour, but it's the last show we'll ever do," he told the audience as he ended the performance. His band was taken by surprise as well. Many believed Bowie was giving up music completely, but in reality, he was just bidding Ziggy farewell. The decision was made for a number of reasons. Mismanagement and excessive spending had rendered the Ziggy Stardust tour financially unsustainable. Bowie had to move on creatively. The character had gained so much notoriety that it began to eclipse the man who created it. He wasn't the type to stay in one place for too long, he had more ideas and personas to develop. David Bowie was one of the most well-known rock stars in the world by the middle of the 1970s. Behind the celebrity, however, his life was unraveling. He was caught in a vicious cycle of isolation, paranoia, and heavy cocaine use. He had been completely engulfed by Los Angeles. He was severely addicted by 1974 and was barely able to survive on milk and red bell peppers. He became dangerously overweight at 95 pounds. He was losing his train of thought. Later on, he acknowledged that this was the darkest period of his life. He was paranoid. He developed an obsession with occultism, secret histories and Nazi Germany. The location of the notorious Manson family murders was only a few doors from his Los Angeles home. He thought he was being pursued by evil forces. He started keeping his urine in bottles because he was so paranoid that he thought spirits might use it against him. The distinction between illusion and reality was muddled by hallucinations. "It fell into the bowels of the earth," he said. The outside world turned into a danger zone. Despite everything, he continued to compose music. His unraveling mind produced his 1976 album, Station to Station. It presented the slender white Duke, a chilly, aloof figure that reflected his shattered condition. Later on, Bowie acknowledged that he didn't remember recording the album. He had forgotten those months because of cocaine. In retrospect, he referred to this as the darkest time in his life. He realized he couldn't continue in this manner by the beginning of 1976. He was persuaded to leave Los Angeles by his assistant, Coco Schwab. He fled to Europe after packing up. his life would be saved by that choice. The slender white Duke was more than a stage character. Bowie incorporated it into his actual life. The character was eerily emotionless, well-dressed, and elegant. He was a very Aryan fascist type, according to Bowie. He was so good at the part that it began to affect his public persona. He shocked the world with remarks he made in drug-fueled interviews that year. Fans were alarmed by his remarks about fascism. Hitler was one of the first rock stars, he claimed in one interview. In another, he implied that a fascist leader might be advantageous for Britain. His remarks incited indignation. People started to wonder about his true position. In May 1976, when he arrived at Victoria Station in London, the controversy erupted. A photographer caught what appeared to be a Nazi salute as he waved to fans from an open car window. Bowie denied it, claiming that it was simply a poor angle, but the harm had already been done. The slender white Duke had overreached himself. Years later, he disassociated himself from this time, attributed it to his drug use, and acknowledged that his mental state was unstable. He described that period as the worst of his life and called the Duke a nasty character. Even after the controversy subsided, the slender white Duke continued to be one of his most intricate creations. Bowie relocated to Berlin in late 1976 after leaving Los Angeles. He had to get away from the madness. He was joined by Iggy Pop, who was also attempting to overcome addiction. They made their home in the Schönberg neighborhood of West Berlin, in a small apartment above an auto repair shop. The Berlin Wall split the city, which was tense and rich in history. It was the antithesis of Los Angeles. There, Bowie might vanish. Initially, old habits persisted. Iggy and Bowie continued to have wild nights. They attempted a high-speed collision with a wall one evening after smashing their dealer's car. However, things evolved over time. Berlin's underground art scene served as a source of inspiration for Bowie. He frequented clubs like Jungle, drag bars, and cafes. He was a fan of German krautrock bands such as Neu! And Kraftwerk. He was pushed in a different direction by their experimental sounds. He also collaborated closely with Iggy Pop during this time. The Idiot and Lust for Life, two albums that contributed to Iggy's career comeback, were co-written and produced by Bowie. Above all, however, Berlin turned into a healing city. Later, Bowie characterized it as a tense city that provided him with just what he needed. Bowie recorded what became known as the Berlin Trilogy between 1977 and 1979. His music underwent a dramatic change with the release of these three albums: Low, 1977, Heroes, 1977, and Lodger, 1979. Low came first, and they embraced ambient and electronic sound, moving away from his past. It was influenced by his experience in Berlin but was partially recorded in France. It featured an experimental format, with eerie instrumentals on one side and broken rock songs on the other. Co-written with Brian Eno, the song Warsaw encapsulated the spooky ambience of Cold War Europe. Upon the album's January 1977 release, many critics and fans were perplexed. He had never done anything like that before. Low eventually rose to prominence as one of his most well-known pieces. He recorded Heroes later that year. All of it was created in Berlin, close to the wall. Bowie saw a real couple kissing close to the wall, which served as the inspiration for the album's title track. A tiny act of rebellion in a city split. A distinctive recording method gave the song its recognizable sound. Several microphones were positioned at various separations, recording Bowie's voice in layers as his volume increased. One of his most potent anthems was the end result. Lodger brought the trilogy to a close in 1979. With its early new wave sounds and world music influences, it stood out from the other two. It was recorded in Switzerland and New York instead of Berlin, as was the case with the first two albums. Although it initially drew mixed reviews, its daring style eventually became well known. Let's Dance by David Bowie was more than just an album. It was a pivotal moment that catapulted him into international fame. It signaled a daring change in his sound and was released on April 14, 1983. He collaborated with Chic's Nile Rodgers, fusing dance pop, new wave, and post-disco into a polished, radio-friendly sound. Stevie Ray Vaughan, a Texas blues guitarist who was then unknown, played lead guitar on the album, which was recorded in December 1982 at the Power Station in New York. Let's Dance, the album's title track, became Bowie's biggest hit and peaked at the top of the charts all over the world when it was released as a single on March 14, 1983. MTV was dominated by its Australian-shot music video, which introduced him to a new generation. Modern Love and China Girl, 2 additional singles, also became huge hits. Let's Dance became a huge sensation thanks to the support of equally well-liked videos. Bowie had perfected the art of both music and visuals. The album became his best-selling record, selling over 10.7 million copies worldwide. It remained on the Billboard charts for 69 weeks, peaking at number 4 in the US and number 1 for 3 weeks in the UK. Bowie broke the record by having 10 albums in the UK's top 100 at the same time by the middle of 1983. Bowie landed one of his most famous movie roles 3 years later. He portrayed Jareth the Goblin King in Jim Henson's fantasy film Labyrinth in 1986. In order to save her younger brother from Jareth, Jennifer Connelly's character Sarah had to navigate a magical labyrinth. And Music, in which Bowie portrayed a villain who was both frightening and oddly endearing. It was a bold production. Labyrinth, which was written by Terry Jones of Monty Python and executive produced by George Lucas, was shot on lavish sets in England and New York between April and September 1985. Its distinctive puppetry was made by Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and its surrealistic look was designed by fantasy artist Brian Froud. Magic Dance, one of Bowie's contributions to the movie's soundtrack, became a cult favorite. He had to do the baby sound effects himself in one backstage scene since the toddler actor wouldn't cooperate. In spite of its inventiveness, Labyrinth did not do well at the box office. Despite having a $25 million budget, it only made $12.9 million in the United States but made $34 million abroad. Critics couldn't decide what to call it. It's odd for kids to be so fanciful for adults. Bowie was prepared to leave pop superstardom by 1989. In the same year, he joined forces with guitarist Reeves Gabrels, the Sales Brothers, Tony on bass, and Hunt on drums to form the hard rock group Tin Machine. Tin Machine functioned as a democracy, in contrast to his solo endeavors, with equal creative input from each member. Tin Machine, their debut album, was aggressive and unvarnished when it was released on May 22, 1989. It addressed themes of global concerns and individual hardships and was recorded live with few overdubs at Mountain Studios in Switzerland and Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas. Gabriel's experimental guitar work was on full display in Heavens and Here, and Bowie's gritty vocals complemented the heavier tone. There were differing opinions among critics. Some referred to it as a forerunner of the grunge movement, ahead of its time. Others wrote it off as disorderly. Fans were perplexed as well. After years as a world-renowned figure, Bowie was now just another band member. His stadium performances stood in sharp contrast to the Tin Machine tour, which featured the band performing in modest settings without ostentatious production. However, Tin Machine was a creative reset for Bowie. He subsequently referred to it as a lifeline, stating that it enabled him to break free from the stalemate of the mid-1980s. He was particularly influenced by Gabrels to adopt a more experimental style, which influenced his subsequent work. Due to internal strife and low sales, the band disbanded in 1992 after releasing 2 studio albums and 1 live album. Although many fans disregarded Tin Machine at the time, it was a significant move in retrospect. It rekindled Bowie's love of music and paved the way for his subsequent innovations. Years later, he expressed gratitude for Tin Machine, stating, "They charged me up. I'm not sure how much." The life of David Bowie was filled with love, hardship, and rebirth. On March 20, 1970, he wed Mary Angela Barnett at London's Bromley Register Office. Angie later disclosed that their marriage was partially based on convenience, despite the fact that most people thought it was a conventional love story. She was able to obtain a work permit in the UK thanks to it. Nevertheless, they had a close bond and collaborated to create Bowie's Ziggy Stardust character. She supported his artistic ventures and contributed to the image's development. That brought him fame. Duncan Zoe Haywood Jones, their only child, was born on May 30, 1971. Bowie was ecstatic and composed cooks to commemorate the birth of his son. Though fame changed everything, he loved being a father. He was using drugs more frequently and his career was taking off. Angie claimed that although their relationship fluctuated between personal and professional spheres, they eventually drifted apart. Following their divorce, Duncan continued living with Bowie, which caused tension in his relationship with Angie. They had stopped talking by the time he was 13. Later, Duncan found success as a filmmaker, winning a BAFTA for his 2009 debut feature, Moon. Bowie and Angie finalized their divorce in 1980. After 10 years of marriage, they reached a settlement of $500,000, which was paid in installments. A gag order that forbade Angie from talking about their relationship for 10 years was also part of the agreement. Bowie disagreed with her later assertion that she played a significant role in his early success. He severed all contact with her after calling her corrosive. His first marriage was very different from his second. At a dinner party in 1990, Bowie got to know Somali supermodel Iman. He fell in love with her right away and pursued her with a fervor he had never experienced before. On April 24, 1992, they tied the knot in Lausanne, Switzerland. Italy's Florence hosted a second ceremony. This marriage, in contrast to his first, was based on a strong bond of love and respect. They avoided the media and kept their private lives private. Bowie subsequently declared that he had never wed a famous person. He was married to the love of his life. Bowie and Iman welcomed their daughter, Alexandria Zara Jones, also known as Lexi, on August 15, 2000. She weighed 7 pounds, 4.6 ounces when she was born at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. Bowie witnessed the birth and even performed the actual cutting of the umbilical cord. The couple was experiencing pure joy at that moment. Lexi's birth felt miraculous because they had battled infertility for years. In order to devote more time to his family and see his daughter grow up, Bowie slowed down his career. The longest and most ambitious tour in David Bowie's career was called a reality tour. It began in Copenhagen on October 7, 2003, and ended in Mountain View, California, on July 25, 2004. The tour was enormous, with more than 110 performances in Europe, North America, Asia, and Oceania. Bowie also performed in Australia and New Zealand for the first time. He has performed for over 1 million fans in 17 countries since his Glass Spider tour in 1987. The set list included both brand new reality songs and timeless tunes like Heroes, Rebel Rebel, and Life on Mars. The tour was the 9th highest grossing tour of 2004 with a total revenue of $46 million. Talent abounds in Bowie's band. The lead guitar played by Earl Slick gave the song a raw electric edge. Gail and Dorsey provided strong vocals and played bass. As guitarist and bandleader, Jerry Leonard contributed atmospheric textures. On the drums, Sterling Campbell maintained a steady rhythm. Mike Garson's distinctive piano and keyboard work, however, gave it a special touch. Catherine Russell contributed to the band's dynamic sound by playing extra keyboards and providing backup vocals. As usual, Bowie was ahead of his time, and this tour was no exception. He performed at one of the first ever live-streamed rock concerts in September 2003, before the official tour even started. It was aired in 5.1 surround sound from London to a global audience, demonstrating once more how Bowie was constantly pushing the envelope. Then everything stopped abruptly. Bowie performed what would be his last full-length show at the Hurricane Festival in Germany on June 25, 2004. He had experienced excruciating chest pain in Prague a few days before. It was misdiagnosed as nerve damage by doctors. He ignored the pain and carried on with his performance. He finished his set that night in Germany, but he passed out backstage. After he was taken to the hospital, medical professionals discovered that his artery was severely blocked. His life was saved by emergency angioplasty, but the remainder of the tour was cancelled. Bowie never went on tour again after his recovery. He formally retired from performing live in 2006. He permanently stopped touring after decades of traveling. Bowie remained virtually unknown to the public for the next 10 years. No interviews, no concerts, no new music. Because he was so silent, there were rumors about his health and whether he would ever come back. He hadn't done a formal interview since 2003, and he had no intention of doing so again. Rare appearances were few and far between. He played with Arcade Fire at the Fashion Rocks event in New York in September 2005, joining them for 2 of his own songs in Wake Up. He sang Comfortably Numb in Arnold Lane with David Gilmour at the Royal Albert Hall the following year. He provided backing vocals for the song Reflector by Arcade Fire in 2013. Fans found these moments thrilling, but they weren't often. Bowie lived a quiet life in New York with his wife, Iman, and daughter, Lexi, avoiding the spotlight. Then everything changed on January 8, 2013, his 66th birthday. The following day, Bowie unexpectedly revealed a new album. It came as a total surprise. Just an announcement in the song "Where Are We Now," with no press or rumors. Fans and critics were trying to figure out what had happened when the single shot to the top of the UK iTunes chart. Between May 2011 and October 2012, Bowie had secretly recorded the album in New York. To keep it a secret, all parties had signed non-disclosure agreements. The album became popular right away. In the UK, Belgium, Germany, Ireland, and Switzerland, it made its debut at the top of the charts. It was Bowie's highest charting album in the United States, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard 200. It was hailed by critics as one of the biggest musical comebacks ever. Bowie's face was obscured by a white square on the album cover, which was a striking reimagining of Heroes. The message was unambiguous. Although he was accepting his past, he was not letting it define him. Despite the album's popularity, Bowie didn't promote it or go on tour. He didn't perform live or do interviews. He allowed the music to speak for itself. Even prior to his heart attack, this choice was not novel. Bowie had started to steer clear of performances that were fueled by nostalgia. He did not perform many of his greatest hits during his 1995 outdoor tour. Instead of rehashing the past, he wanted to concentrate on new music. He had struck a balance between the old and the new by the time a reality tour took place. However, he completely stopped touring after 2004. He declined every invitation to perform, even after the following day became a worldwide sensation. Maintaining his artistic vision was just as important as his health. Being a legacy act didn't appeal to him. Black Star, David Bowie's last album, was more than just music. It was a thoughtfully written farewell, a final gift from an artist who had always lived according to his own rules. Released on his 69th birthday, January 8, 2016. 2 days before his death, the album arrived. Bowie's 18-month battle with liver cancer was unknown to his fans. Only a few close friends and associates were aware of his diagnosis, which he had concealed. The meaning of the album was abruptly altered on January 10 when the news of his death broke. It was now a farewell rather than merely a record. Black Star, according to producer Tony Visconti, was Bowie's farewell present. And that's evident in the music. "Look up here, I'm in heaven" is the eerie opening line of the song Lazarus. Bowie is seen in the music video lying in a hospital bed, looking weak but determined. A man looking straight at his own death. Black Star, the title track, is even more enigmatic. It combines jazz, electronic components, and eerie vocals to create an ethereal atmosphere that makes it seem as though Bowie was already transcending life. Secretly, the album was recorded in New York City. Always willing to change, Bowie sought a sound that was different from his previous work. He encouraged jazz musicians like Donny McCaslin and Mark Guiliana to push themselves beyond convention and structure by working with them. The end product was a cutting-edge masterpiece with complex meanings and cryptic lyrics. Bowie remained totally committed to his art despite his deteriorating health. Until the very end, he continued to create and work. Critics hailed Black Star as one of Bowie's best songs when it was first released. It became his first album to reach the top of the US Billboard 200 and debuted at number 1 in the UK. 3 Grammy Awards, including Best Alternative Music Album, were given to it in 2017. But Black Star developed into something more than just a chart success and an award win. In an effort to uncover deeper meanings, bands and academics have analyzed its lyrics and imagery. Each image and note seems to be a thoughtfully positioned fragment of a final message that will be studied and experienced for many generations to come.